Welcome, new and old friends. I just have a couple things to say, and then the stories will begin. Before you drift off into the dream realm, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. If you'd like to find out about my social links, my website, how to help the channel, check the description box. Now turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. It's time to dream. Kids Need a Father by WayTooMuchAcc. I hadn't spoken to my father in over 30 years. Our last conversation had ended in a hate-filled, violent argument, and after that, he vanished from my life completely. So when the lawyer's letter arrived informing me that my estranged father had passed away and left his entire estate to me, I was numb. I hadn't even known where he had lived or if he was even still alive. The address on the letter led me to a small rural neighborhood a few states over. I hadn't heard of this place before, and something about it felt off. I quickly searched the address online, finding little more than a few scattered listings for nearby homes and some articles mentioning the area's history of abandonment. It didn't look like the kind of place anyone would want to live, let alone die. I stared at it for a long time, my thoughts tangled. I wasn't sure if I should even go. After all, this was a man who had never wanted me in his life. Yes, something about the letter made me feel like I couldn't ignore it. I needed to take care of things, close the door on this chapter of my life, whatever it meant. I hesitated, torn between the idea of making arrangements to take a week off and the discomfort of even stepping foot near the house. Taking time off felt like the responsible thing to do, but I couldn't shake the anxiety that came from having to deal with this alone. Finally, I called in and told them I'd be gone for the week. Packed a bag nervously, unsure what I would find when I arrived. 2 days later, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. No matter how hard I tried to focus on work or kept my mind occupied, thoughts of my father kept creeping back in. I wondered what kind of man he had been in those final years. Had he changed? Had he even thought about me? The unanswered questions gnawed at me, but no matter how hard I tried to ignore them, the weight of his absence seemed to hang over me, pulling me under. The morning of the trip arrived, and I found myself sitting in the airport 3 hours before my flight, my nerves a tangled mess. I kept staring at the boarding gate, wishing I could somehow escape the overwhelming sense of dread building inside me. It felt like I was preparing to step into some unknown territory, not just physically, but emotionally. I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront the father I had long since written off, or the secrets he had left behind. The flight seemed too far away, but I couldn't bring myself to leave, couldn't bring myself to turn back either. When it was finally time to board the flight, I stood up from my seat, feeling a sudden rush of cold anxiety flooding through me. As I walked towards the gate, I glanced back at the terminal, a fleeting thought creeping into my mind. What if I just didn't go? What if I turned around, went home, and left the past buried where it belonged? The thought almost felt like a lifeline, a way to avoid whatever nightmare awaited me at that house. But as quickly as the thought surfaced, I squashed it back down, reminding myself that I had no choice but to face what was waiting. I had to know what my father had left me, and perhaps, more importantly, why. With a deep breath, I stepped onto the plane, the doors closing behind me, sealing my fate. The flight seemed to drag on. The minutes stretched longer than they should have. When we finally landed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a place I wasn't meant to be. The small airport was quiet. The air hummed and thick with an unfamiliar weight. After picking up my bag, I head to the rental car counter, where the agent handed me the keys with a friendly smile and a "Hope you enjoy a good stay." The car was a nondescript sedan, nothing special, but it felt like a small comfort in the sea of unfamiliarity around me. I checked into the hotel shortly after, the lobby dark and empty. The receptionist gave me a polite smile, but it didn't seem to reach her eyes. She handed me the room key, and I numbly made my way upstairs, letting myself into the room. I dropped my bag onto the bed and glanced around at the sterile, lifeless decor. For a moment, I thought about sitting down to gather my thoughts, but the tension in my chest only grew tighter. I couldn't bring myself to eat lunch. The thought of food made me feel queasy, the anxiety twisting in my stomach. I couldn't focus on anything other than the house that waited for me. After 20 minutes of settling, I made my way downstairs again, knowing I'd have to get some drinks and food to nibble on before I hunkered down for the night. The drive and normality of trying to eat felt like the bare minimum I could do to keep myself functioning. I needed to keep my mind distracted, to keep myself from unraveling with the fear of what laid ahead. Returning to my hotel room, I set the bag of gas station food on the small table and stared at the contents for a moment. The thought of forcing food down seemed impossible, but I knew I had to try. Yet everything about this trip, this moment, felt suffocating. Like I was on the verge of something I couldn't escape. Dinner would have to wait. For now, I just needed to sleep, if only to prepare myself for what was coming next. The next morning, I woke up early, the weight of the day ahead pressing down on me. I didn't want to wait any longer. I had to see the house now. With a stomach churning anxiety, I drove to the address. I pulled up in front of the house as the first light of day began to break over the horizon. It felt wrong. The house was eerily quiet, the yard overgrown, the windows dark and untouched by time. The place looked abandoned, and yet is unmistakably the house I had come to claim. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I was here. I had to do this. Inside, the house was just as depressing as it looked from the outside. Dust clung to the furniture, the air stale and thick with disuse. I moved through the rooms carefully, opening cabinets, drawers, anything I could think of to search, but nothing out of the ordinary jumped out at me. For a moment, I thought I had been wrong about everything, that maybe this was just a mistake, a strange coincidence. But then I entered the kitchen, and that's where I saw it. A narrow door, cleverly hidden behind the wooden panels, nearly invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. I had no idea what was behind it, but my instincts screamed that I needed to know. My heart raced as I hesitated, but my curiosity pushed me forward. I was smart enough to know not to go into a dark room behind a hidden door in any house, especially one like this where everything felt off. But I also wasn't foolish enough to head into any potentially dangerous situation without being prepared. I had a concealed carry permit and never went anywhere without my firearm. There wasn't an issue with bringing it along. I had it stored under the plane for the flight, and upon landing, placed it safely in the trunk of the rental car. I quickly turned back to the car and retrieved my 4th generation Austrian 9mm pistol and a flashlight, knowing full well I needed both to feel remotely safe. The flashlight flickered to light, casting a narrow beam of light as I made my way back towards the house. The hidden room waited, and I was ready to confront whatever it held. The room beyond was small, no more than a jail cell in size. I stepped in, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a narrow staircase that led down further into the house. As I descended the steps, the smell of mildew and something else, something metallic, filled my nostrils. At the bottom, the beam of my flashlight fell on something that sent a chill running down my spine. What looked like boxes of documents lined the walls, surrounding a circle of numerous arranged stands, every one displaying a wig. They sat like trophies, each placed with meticulous care. But then I froze. My gaze landed on the last wig in the room, which stood out among the others. It was bleached blonde with the tips dyed red. My stomach churned as I realized what I was seeing. It was unmistakable. I knew that hair. I had seen that hair. It was my ex-girlfriend's hair, the one who had gone missing over 10 years ago, the one that I had never been able to forget, the one who had vanished without a trace, just like my father. This couldn't be a coincidence. My mind reeled as the room seemed to close in around me. I felt sick to my core, an icy tingling crawling up my spine. I had to get out. I turned and ran back upstairs, my thoughts a blur as I dialed the police, my hands shaking. When they arrived, I was still outside, shaking, waiting, praying that they would know what to do. The officers moved in quickly, their presence bringing some measure of comfort, but the horror of what I had just discovered lingered. After an hour of investigation and forensic examination, they came back to me with chilling news. The wigs, every single one of them, belonged to a woman who had gone missing across many states over the past 30 years. The lead officer, his face grim, turned to me and said, "We can't tie it all together yet, but we think we're dealing with a serial killer." The house, the wigs, my father, everything I thought I had known had been a lie. My father wasn't just some estranged man. He had been part of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. And now I was stuck in the middle of it. In the weeks that followed, I found myself trapped in a waking nightmare, unable to escape the gravity of what had been uncovered. The investigation into my father's twisted legacy had been exhaustive, but the truth was even darker than I could have imagined. The women, those missing for decades, had all been reported missing within a 75-mile radius of wherever I had been living. I'm 45 now. And in those 30 years since I last saw my father, I have lived in 8 different states. Yet no matter how far I went, no matter how many different lives I tried to build, my father had always been closer than I realized. The investigators, piecing together everything they could from the hidden room I had discovered, came to a chilling conclusion. My father had been following me. The file boxes in that dark room were filled with documents, photographs, and videos that chronicled his every move. Proof that he had been near, watching, waiting. In each box, there were disturbing images of the victims, but worse still, some of those photographs and videos included me, always in the background, just out of focus, as if I was never meant to notice. As a teenager, a young adult, with my ex, I had unwillingly walked past the traces of my father's presence without knowing. My father had filled me at different points in my life, moments I had long forgotten. Family vacation, birthday parties, even casual outings. Only now, I could see his eyes on me from the shadows, always lingering, always close. his watchful eyes capturing my every move. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I realized how long he had been stalking me, quietly ensuring that I was always within his reach. My whole life, I had been surrounded by him, and I never even knew it. In the countless hours that I spent working with the detectives, piecing together the nightmare of my father's secret life, I could only think about how I had never truly escaped him. All these years, I had assumed that the distance between us, the different places I had lived, the new identities I had built for myself, meant that I was free. But my father had never let me go. I still don't know how to process everything. How do you make sense of a lifetime of lies and horror? How do you go back to a life that now feels entirely hollow? Every day since this began, I felt a mixture of disbelief and dread. The faces of the victims, those women who had vanished in the shadows of my father's world, haunted me. I have since left the investigation and all of the secrets behind me, the shadows of my father's legacy lingering in every thought. In the time since, I made one final move, relocating to a remote corner of the world where no one knows my name, nothing connects me to the life I once had. There's a sense of peace in this isolation, a silence that allows me to finally breathe without looking over my shoulder. I have no intention of ever contacting anyone I knew before. They remain buried in the past, just like the life I used to live. But now, I'm left with the inescapable truth. He will always be watching. I remember when pain didn't need to be allowed to be real. My sister rasped through cracked lips, barely able to open her swollen mouth. Her vocal cords had been torn hours ago from screaming, her jaw hung slack and trembling, but the monitor above her bed still blinked. Insignificant anguish detected, so the morphine stayed locked behind the glass. Updated rules for living in your new home. You cannot run. By Senior Seesaw 5359. The old rules. Hello, if you're listening to this, that means that you are now the official owner of this house. However, in order to ensure a healthy lifestyle, let's go over some rules. 1. Get some sleep. All that caffeine and all-nighters are really not good for you. Not getting enough sleep has been linked to anxiety and the feeling that someone is watching you. 2. Do not touch any of the pre-placed furniture. They are merely there for staging, and I will shortly return to remove them from your property. Be especially careful of the couch, as it's very old and sometimes even creaks on its own as if it's snoring. If your gut tells you something's wrong with it, use your brain to think and do not touch the couch. 3. Keep your pantry stocked. There are a number of good reasons for doing so, such as allowing for fewer grocery runs and quick meal preparation when you are hungry. 4. Play with your dog. Like any dog, yours will always be barking at night as if there was an intruder in your house. No need to fret, as your dog simply wants your love and attention. 5. Do not be too loud in the morning. Some people, including myself, enjoy a more nocturnal lifestyle. I'm sure that your neighbors have sensitive hearing and will be disturbed by loud noises in the morning. Updated rules. I sincerely apologize for the shock and fear caused by the intruder in the couch. Had I known about the issue, I would have sent someone to pick up the couch ASAP. However, I happen to be a professional in this field. Here's a list of rules for you to follow until I come and deal with it. For you, please jump to Rule 3. 1. Don't let him escape. Kicking him out so aggressively and violently as you did definitely made him mad. Don't let him escape, as I know where you live and will surely come back for revenge. However, this is easier said than done, as his dirty, greasy body will make him hard to catch. It will be very unlikely that you'll be able to catch him, so just move on to the next rule. 2. Don't forget what he looks like. Be sure to remember his long, messy hair and beard, the shade of brunette it was, and how it hides all his facial features. 3. Stay in a room with only one access point, preferably the one closest to the front door. If you try to find and block off all entry points to your house, there's no guarantee that you are quick enough. I could already be hiding inside your house. He was able to fit in a couch after all. Who knows where else he could hide? 4. Don't trust the police. The police in this neighborhood are untrustworthy. They probably committed more crimes than criminals they locked up. In fact, they are probably involved in this somehow. Instead, wait for my help. 5. Remember our secret knock. 2 light, 1 heavy, 1 light, 1 heavy, all in quick succession. If you look through your door peephole, you should see a guy with no hair on his head or face except for his brunette eyebrows and eyelashes. That is me. After you hear our secret knock, open the door and let me in. If only one or neither apply, do not open the door. 6. Remain in the room you chose in Rule 3. I will thoroughly search and find every spot someone could hide in until I find him. I will let you know that I have captured the intruder from a distant room and take him out through the back door. Since I don't want to disturb the neighbors, as mentioned earlier, I will leave almost impossibly quiet, but sure to wait a few minutes after just in case. There's no need to see me out. I'm just doing my job. If you still feel anxious that someone may be living in your house, don't worry. The feeling will end soon.
You know, he had murdered 100 men without ever being seen. So at the time, I launched the greatest manhunt of my career to finally snare him. But now, I would just be fine with knowing what he looks like, murmured the officer, staring blankly at the 6-figure death toll.
I just need access to the warehouse. By Spider Dad P. When I was in high school, this town was nothing more than dirt and rocks. The medical offices were the only game in town. Nowadays, it's the birthplace and graveyard of warehouses, where tumbleweeds once rode the wind freely. Now they get caught in chain-link fences. I hate what they did to my home. Funny, all of a sudden, I'm calling it home. I'm lying to myself. I live on an abandoned military base, cursed by more than nuclear fallout. If I want midnight snacks, I'm going to have to try to get a legit place. No more squatting. That's what I'm thinking as I step into a giant warehouse. The gig itself is legit. I need access, so I called the temp agencies they work with, got my forklift certification, and boom, I had a reason to be here. My real job? Reporting back to an OSHA agent about any violations. That's where my real skills kick in, watching which rules the company pretends to enforce and which ones they ignore. Years of breaking into offices and snappy pictures of financial docs gave me a good idea of how these places run. It's a simple job, basically above the board, and more importantly, no demons involved. I'm helping people, at least that's the lie I tell myself. I don't really care about everyone's safety. They're adults. They know right from wrong. They also know that crossing the line gets you a pink slip. Something I don't have to worry about. If I get caught, I just play dumb. The warehouse I'm in is in my hometown. It's a small upstart operation supplying local shops with dry goods. The problem? The shops are getting moldy products. The shelf life on this stuff is supposed to be at least 3 years. I just need proof of mold, evidence of it being documented, and proof it's being ignored. This is gonna be fun. Like any other warehouse job, I go check out the forklift I'll be operating. I pretend to go over the safety checklists. Really, I'm watching everyone else, all of them getting on faulty equipment. I can tell the problems with each one just by how the driver starts it. When everyone's gone, I actually look at my checklist and see the last time anyone filled in the form was 2 years ago. I inspect my lift and head to the dry goods section of the warehouse. The production floor is pretty boring. Everyone seems to be following health measures, wearing their hairnets, gloves, masks, the whole deal. I pretend to start pulling down a pallet of rice. Shelf life is 2 years. I check a few more pallets and confirm they're all good. I head to the spice and herb section next. On the way, I notice a pallet of candles in the disposition area. Some of them are broken, shattered, or cracked. A few are burnt. They are totally not suspicious or anything. I'll have to swing back and look into that. As soon as I turn down the aisles with the spices, I see loose leaves and powders everywhere. Not only that, there is rat droppings. I take out my phone and snap a couple shots. I head deeper into the aisles and notice the numbers are wrong. 1 or 2 boxes are missing, easy to miss if you didn't have access to the inventory records. I double-checked and noticed the sage and cloves were off by 2 boxes each. On further inspection, someone's drawn something on the remaining boxes, a circle made out of lines. I snapped a few photos of the boxes and the paperwork showing the numbers don't add up. At the other end of the aisle are canned goods. I make my way down and my nostrils get assaulted with the worst scent I've ever smelled. There are canned vegetables burst open, turning gray, shining from a film of slime. It takes everything I have not to throw up. I take pictures quickly and leave. When I think I'm safely away, I inhale deep breaths of air. Fuck this place. That was disgusting. Time to get some fresh air. I'm on the roof of the building. The breeze is nice. The desert always looks different from above. That's one of the cool things about this town, and that's the hill. The perspective is priceless. Focus on the mission, though. I can't get into the office through the doors. Those need keycards. Instead, I'll use the roof access. There are 2 entry points, one above the warehouse and the one that leads to the server rooms. The server room needs to be cooled at all times, so logically they made sure HVAC has access to the roof as well. That access is only secured by a deadbolt. Easy enough. I'll make short work of that and walk right into the office, grab the HR files, and game over. If companies knew how easy it is to break into secure files, they never trust temp agencies. I should really be thanking my mother. As I pick the lock on the deadbolt, my mind wanders to when I was younger. My mom used to think people were coming into our house at night. So, naturally, when you think someone is breaking in, you set booby traps. At least, that's what came naturally to my mother. I used to help her set up those traps. Little did I know, I was absorbing information. Weak spots in security. How someone can sneak in through a window, pick the lock to the front door. How to set up distractions from the real trap. My mother unknowingly taught me both sides. Hard not to laugh at those skills are finally coming in handy. I walk slowly, scanning the entire area for anything that looks like complaint files, a folder, a stack of papers, something. I walked over to the desk with a green folder labeled disposition. I shrugged and opened it. I flip through the papers and see spontaneous mold and snag that report. Right behind it is a report on used candles. I take that one too. As I slip the reports into my clipboard, the light comes on. I freeze and set the green folder down. I slowly move towards the back of the office. I hear a voice over a walkie-talkie. I bump a desk with my knee and knock over a phone. "Who's there?" a voice calls out from the other room. I step into view, hands at wrist level. I got lost looking for the bathroom. The security officer looks at me hard. "How'd you end up in here?" he says, tone thick with suspicion. "There was an open door and I just walked in. It's my first day. I don't want to get in trouble. I need this job. My mom just died and I need to pay rent next week and still pay for her burial." That just flowed right out. The security guard nods towards the exit. "Be careful what doors you open around here. Some are better left closed." I head out, clipboard in hand. Back on the forklift, I'm reading the report on the mold. It says the products leave the warehouse perfectly fine. Every single shipment even went through an audit, an added step for quality control before it gets sent to the store. Photos of the shipments are included too. Odd, there are markings on the outgoing shipments similar to the ones on the sage and cloves. Similar, but not the same. I compared the photo in the report to the one I took earlier. When you overlap them, they create a weak hex on the food. This is just weird. I told that bastard not to give me anything magic related. Hard to believe this was accidental. Or is it something worse? No real magic, and I'm seeing connections that aren't there, like my mom. No. Shake the thought. Focus. Think. The candles. There are candles in the photos too. I checked the other disposition report. Looks like they've been finding these satanic candles, you know, the kind that disguise themselves as Catholic bullshit, with burnt wicks. The candles start showing up a week before the mold. I remember a cult a few years back that tried to start a biological warfare on the upper class in Victorville. Failed quick. They left pig carcasses all over town trying to spread swine flu. It's thought it came from pigs. Looks like I'm taking a box of clothes and candles on my way out. Send them out for testing. I bet there's no real witchcraft going on. The wax in the candles must be activating mold growth on the boxes, and the circles are just marking the target product. I did my job, gathered the evidence they need, showed they know what's going on under their nose. I get a nice payout, don't ask any questions, and I can finally ditch the Air Force Base. She begged him to turn her so they never part, but his kiss strained her soul instead. Now she crawls at his coffin each dusk and whispers, "You promised forever." Do not stop at the gas station on Highway 410 by Aulrik. You're on your way down Highway 410, on your way to enjoy some snow at the ski resort before the season ends. You have the entire week off from work, and you couldn't be happier to take a break, enjoying the fresh air and the smell of pine needles. The unfortunate matter at hand is that even with a full tank of gas when you started, you are nearing 1/6 tank left, and you still have a ways to go. The sun begins to set as you drive behind a slow semi-truck, impeding your journey to move quickly, though you'd rather not accelerate and blow all your gas just trying to bypass. 10 miles to the next gas station, the next sign states, giving you a sense of reassurance that you'll be alright. You've never been a fan of playing it on this dangerous side of allowing your car engine to sputter out, because you cut it too close to refueling time. The miles whiz by until you make a slight right off to the exit. You follow the sign through the rural terrain, evergreen trees lining the road on either side. The warm touch of light turning a fade crimson, purple, and orange as the sun peaks behind the horizon. You pull up to the gas station, but it's one you've never seen before. The gas station seems well maintained, like any other commercial gas station you've visited, yet something feels off. The station's sign simply read Gas Station 410. The station covering is bordered with blue and yellow, while the logo seemed like a shell or a mouth with jagged spikes or teeth. It's hard to tell with the fading light. You witness a line of cars, about 2 cars long, waiting for the 2 occupied pumps. You figure you might as well park your car and take a pee break rather than wait in the line. You park off to the side of the building where you can see the ice machine, propane tanks, and firewood for purchase. The front door of the store jingles as you step inside. The lights in the store seem oddly white and sterile, as if the light itself is purifying anything it touches. The store attendant looks at you with timid eyes. His average build and youthful appearance seem underwhelming in a place like this. A name badge reading Max was pinned to his white t-shirt uniform. He's clearly over the age of 18, but couldn't be more than 20. He feels off and out of place, as if he was just a placeholder for something bigger and grander. You make your way over to the restroom only to find it locked with a code. On the door reads a sign, restroom usage for paying customers only. You furrow your brow in annoyance. You planned on buying a snack and some water anyway, but still, you need to use the restroom about an hour ago before your bladder bursts. You quickly grab a bottle of water from the fridge and swipe your card. You notice the timestamp on the receipt says 1750. Below it, the bathroom code of 0067. You punch the code into the electric lock and hear it whirl, allowing you access inside. The restroom looked completely different from the store itself. While the store looked pristine without an item out of place or a spill on the ground, the restroom looked as if darkness had camped out here but never left. The dim light buzzed as if it's on its last breath. The gray trash bin was filled to the brim. The mirror laid cracked and looked as if it was pieced back together. The size of the room did not make sense either. The stalls seemed to be a journey, feeling as if you were walking a mile to reach it. The only light source staying at the door, unable to penetrate any darkness that swallowed your body as you entered the stall. The toilet didn't seem unclean, just absent, as if it had never been there in the first place. You relieve yourself, standing, feeling a force pulling you towards the absence of space. You quickly zip your pants back up and speed walk to the sink to wash your hands. You pull out the paper towels to dry your hands as you find the light blink once, twice, then nothingness, plunging you into an unspeakable silent darkness. Not even the water drips from the socket or making an echo. You pull out the restroom door to find yourself back in the gas station store, but everything is now wrong. The once brightly lit room now lies in a still gray hue. The store is silent without even the sound of the fridge making an electric hum. The outline of a body stands motionless at the front counter. You call out and approach with caution. Your voice trembles with distress. You receive no reply. As you approach, you understand why. The outline of the body is nothing more than a cardboard cutout eerily similar to the proportions of the store attendant Max. You bite your lower lip as you lower your eyes towards the front countertop. Littered across the counter lay countless lottery ticket scratch-offs, all used. Each scratch seemingly deeper than any coin or human nail could cut. It looked as if each card was branded. You narrow your eyes. Alone, each card felt random, but together, each etch made a letter, a word. Rules for gas station 410. Rule 1. The station is cut off from light at exactly 1800. Do not use any light source. It will attract them. Rule 2. Do not enter the bathroom after 1800. It's where they come from. Rule 3. Leave an offering of food consisting of 1 bag of hot Cheetos, 1 pack of M&Ms, 2 hot dogs, and 1 blue raspberry Slurpee outside the back entrance before 2000 hours. It will sedate them from entering. Rule 4. Max is your friend. It is safe when he is stationary. Rule 5. If you see Max move on his own, do not follow. Max cannot move on his own. He has been compromised. Rule 6. Do not stand or look out any window between 2000 hours and 2100 hours. This is when they hunt. Rule 7. Do not stand or exist in total darkness for more than 1 minute. If your body begins to sink into the darkness, remove all article of clothing compromised by the darkness and remove yourself from that position. Do not touch the removed cursed clothing. Rule 8. If you have removed any clothing before sunrise, immediately douse yourself with exactly 2 16-ounce water bottles from the second shelf from the bottom. Do not make eye contact with anything above the 3rd shelf until you have cleansed your body. Rule 9. At precisely 24 hours, place a bottle of 12-ounce water at the front door, bathroom door, back door, and janitor's closet. Complete this task by 26 hours, or they will come in. Rule 10. Do not look outside into the forest. Nothing outside is alive. Rule 11. At 1:33 hours, a car will drive up to pump number 2. Do not approach. Do not let her see you. She will leave once she has filled her tank. Rule 12. If the front desk phone rings, do not answer. Do not use this phone to call out. Rule 13. If you hear the janitor's door creak open, hide within the restocking space behind the water bottles. They do not like water. Rule 14. Wait until the first ray of sunlight before stepping outside of gas station 410. Otherwise, you have not left the darkness. Archaeologists exhumed the remains of a woman they dubbed Medusa, despite her having no connection to snakes. They named her after her abdomen, heavy and filled with stone babies, the calcified remains of an impossible number of pregnancies, all at different stages of gestation. The Sweet Release of Death by Googly Eyes 93. Warning. This story does contain self-harm, self-unaliving, and also hurting others. If you're reading this, do yourself a favor. Fucking die. Now. Yeah, I know. Asking everyone to off themselves is pretty harsh. I don't say that lightly in any way, though, I promise. It's for a good reason. Because if you don't do it now, you may never have the chance later. I went into bioengineering for the sole purpose of helping to better the world. If there was some way that we could create sustainable agriculture in any weather, more bountiful crops, or hell, even a substitute for meat farming, I would be happy with my accomplishments. Unfortunately, I was young and naive when I thought all that, before I was hired for the job that probably damned us all. It was honestly too good to pass up thanks to all the loans I had from grad school. Military contractors in biomedicine field said they would hire me on and they would cover my full tuition loan paid back after 1 year on the job. If you've paid for grad school, you know that's one hell of a deal, especially if the company is also paying a 6-figure salary on the higher end, with majority clearance requirements. I'm not a dumbass. I know it was either that or go behind the goddamn gas station counter scanning cat food and condoms for idiots that shouldn't reproduce in the first place. Oh, Jesus Christ. Every realization I have just makes everything worse. So, government contract, right? We work in a surprisingly normal spot in America's Midwest. A pretty big skyscraper that housed the rest of the firm's businesses. Ours was deep underground, though, highly secure thanks to the nature of our work. I won't lie, when I stepped in, I was super worried I had signed up to work for the fucking Umbrella Corporation. Honestly, it would probably be better if we had a zombie apocalypse than this unending nightmare we're about to experience. Short rundown, I was an associate researcher on this project as well as the lead on lab tests. They were looking for a miracle drug, something that had a 100% cure rate for anything from cancer to dementia to the common cold. I was in, absolutely behind the goal of the project from the start. Meanwhile, our head scientist, an older woman named Deb, was incredibly stony about everything. Nothing seemed good enough for her. There was no excitement when we hit breakthroughs, just a constant, we need more progress type attitude. We couldn't please her, even with cutting-edge science. Meanwhile, Sam was another associate, her specialty being in genetic engineering. Colton rounded out the team, presiding over specimens, records, and administering samples. It was a small team to try and minimize leaks, because we were going to change the world. It's been 5 years since then, and we've gone through a hell of a lot of attempts. Splicing together DNA to try and create a cure-all isn't easy, and I'm not about to go into the specifics of it, because it's not fucking important right now. As with any drug trials, we had to start testing on animals. Look, my ethics weren't for it either, but we started with the standard lab rats before moving on to the primates. The lab rats had shown good promise finally, with most diseases infected cured within a few weeks with a round of drugs. Even the cancer started going away, cells repairing themselves from the decay. Primate trials went much the same, with the apes even having a more energized effect that made them recover even faster. It was all going so right for everything we were working towards. We should have seen the signs once we started human trials. We didn't take volunteers, but instead were given executed death row prisoners. Some we were kind of lucky about, thanks to either the time it takes the American justice system to do a damn thing, or just due to their own genetic predispositions. Some subjects already had sicknesses to test on. Cancer, one with Alzheimer's, and even a poor soul with unchecked syphilis that was running wild. We had our work cut out for us. It was like a damn miracle when we started the treatments, giving them a 14-day course of injections meant to heal them on a genetic level. It was administered straight to their spinal column, spreading through their nervous system. What we saw as the results were amazing. The cancer patient was better by the 5th day, the tumor shrinking down to non-existence in his brain. Unfortunately, when it finally shrunk, he seemed to have an utter breakdown of what he'd done, murdering his family and neighbors to land on death row. I felt bad for him, in a way, because the guy was just screaming pure rage and grief over the death of his kids and wife. That's when he tried to kill himself in his cell, running his head into the wall constantly. Guards were able to intervene, getting to him before he could do any lasting harm to himself. Recovery for him was normal, though he did have a slight concussion. The treatment continued, with the concussion fading in a few days. The subject was kept on full psych lockdown for the remainder of the test while he received psychological counseling. Eventually, though, they took his request with a very reluctant and honestly uncaring attitude. It was approved. He would continue helping us with the test until the trial was complete, and then he'd be allowed to choose execution if he wanted. The guy was distraught, obviously haunted by what he had done. Other test subjects were proceeding a lot the same, though one began to break down after a short time. According to him, we were injecting him with baby's blood, unlocking his satanic powers. Didn't feel bad for him, considering he was executed for the mass amount of things found on hard drives in his house. While administering tests and treatments, we worked in pairs. If there was a subject in the room, there was always one of us paired with one of the 2 guards who worked down here with us. It was me on duty for treatment that day, and the subject was being relatively quiet for the most part. We went in with no issue, the subject cuffed by the guard and set up to administer the drug. Before I knew what was going on, he started ranting again, saying he was going to take down the cabal and help Christ's regime. The typical terrorist bullshit these days. Except this time, he didn't keep to ranting. Instead, he leaned over and sinked his teeth into my arm. He wouldn't let go either, no matter how much the guard tried pulling his jaw open or knocking him in the head. Eventually, he started to draw blood through my scrubs and coat, so the guard took his last resort. Drawing his pistol, he leveled it at the subject's forehead, moving me aside and pulling the trigger. I felt his grip on my arm loosen almost instantly, as the gunshot ran through, splattering gray matter on the wall behind us. The others came running within moments, seeing the steadying pooling of blood on the floor. The subject was terminated, a complete fucking waste of a trial. Can't say he didn't deserve it, but he could have followed through on the one good thing he did in his life and finished the tests. Imagine our surprise when we went to pick him up and take him to the incinerator, and he still had a pulse. Even with all the blood and guts scattered in the room, he was fucking breathing. That changed everything. because we realized we might be able to finish the trial after all. We threw him on a stretcher and brought him to the lab, using whatever we had to staunch the bleeding and set up a vitals monitor. Looking back, it's obvious why he survived, but we still didn't know at the time. He stayed alive, though in a vegetative state, x-rays showing that most of his brain was scrambled by the bullet, with the guy only being able to drool and moan if he really put his remaining mind to it. Meanwhile, the syphilis that had been running rampant in him was gone. Complete recovery other than what was included in his lost brain matter. Then came the final sign thanks to one of the primate subjects. We were still watching them for long-term effects, making sure that it wouldn't trigger a Planet of the Apes scenario or anything. One day, the two got into a fight over food, though it happened overnight, so none of us saw it until the next day on camera footage. Instead, what met us when we entered the lab was the ape enclosure soaked in blood. One of the subjects laying in the dirt, totally disemboweled, yet still trying to crawl towards the glass. It shocked us. This thing had guts hanging from where its stomach was, just dropping out like a fucking piñata. We took him to the lab and did what amounted to a full workup to see what the hell was going on. Half of its organs were eaten by the other ape in an act of dominance. Even still, this thing continued to live, still exhibiting brain waves and a pulse. It was fully aware what was happening around it, though the pain caused it to scream when we weren't pumping it with morphine. Realized after a few days that something bad was happening. The ape still wasn't dead, but the wound it had were just scabbing over. Still brutally deadly, but only causing immense pain instead of expiration. After taking samples, we realized the DNA of the creature was structured differently than before. The treatment seemed to have turned off the ability to die. Of course, once we saw this in the ape subjects, we confirmed it in the human subjects as well. The gunshot wound subject was still going, with a pulse and limited brainwave activity. He's sentient and able to understand basic commands, as well as make sounds with great effort. We decided to give him a test under the guise of mercy. He was given a rudimentary order: blink twice if you want to die, once for no. As soon as he blinked twice, Debbie injected him with a nerve agent that would cause total death within 5 minutes. After about 2 minutes, he began to seize, body erratically jerking around the bed he was on. His mouth began foaming, loud moans of despair coming out as eyes rolled back in his head. His pulse dropped, but never flatlined. His brain activity still going the entire way through. Even after a second dose of nerve agent, he only suffered immense pain, but was unable to die in a conventional form. I took it upon myself to be honest with the other subject, the one who was promised an execution for his sins in service. He was distraught, of course, but went quiet after a few moments. We left him be, or at least attempted to, but before the guard in the room could react, the subject stole the gun straight from his holster. Holding the gun to his temple, the subject flipped the safety off and pulled the trigger, splattering more gore on the freshly painted wall. A look of horror filled his eyes before he started screaming. The pain and weight done settled in. The gun never left his temple, and he pulled the trigger 3 more times before falling to the ground. He just lay there twitching, blood pouring for every hole on his face, as his brain swirled inside with lead. We set him up in the lab, pulse still faintly going, and brain waves still giving off from what was left of his skull. In the process of checking him out, we went ahead and did scans on the other subject. Another shock ran through all of us. His brain was reforming. Matter forming and splitting off from his other cells like a reverse cancer. Things became bleak after a few days, with the realization that it would only restore the parts involving life functions. They would have a pulse, consciousness, full awareness of everything at every second, confirmed by asking the subjects questions and receiving answers. But they could not die. It became too much. We almost felt like we owed it to these people to kill them after trying so hard to make a cure. There was one option we had left though. It was worth a shot. The incinerator. I can still smell his flesh and hear his screams. We put the conspiracy subject in first, thinking it'd probably be a little easier on us considering his past. When we set it off, the screams started immediately. The sound of his limbs thrashing as nerves were burned off at the ends. We were waiting for the screams to stop, waiting for him to finally fucking die. The screams kept going. None of us knew what to do. At some point, he must finally have lost consciousness or just became numb to the pain, but it took hours. When he finally stopped, we gave it a few minutes before shutting the flames off, pulling the cremation tray out with our fingers crossed that it had worked. His charred, blackened body was laying on the tray, twitching every so often. He let out a rasped breath, crisp vocal cords sounding like sandpaper. His pulse still beating, brain activity was still at full capacity, and even with his brain almost melting to the point of soup in his skull, he was still conscious. I think we found a way to actually bond the human soul to a genetic code, leaving us trapped in these meat bags through the treatment. We tried other ways, even decapitation as a full-on last resort. A severed, burned head was still giving off brainwaves, even after all of that. Any amount of pain could happen to the body, any amount of restriction and injury inflicted, but the soul of the person would stay, brain activity never ceasing. They were trapped in their own head, quite literally, even if the rest of them was destroyed. I couldn't deal with what we had wrought. The realization that saving lives had gone into unethical territory like this, with us damning a human to eternal life. Our only hope to die now was old age, and it didn't look like that was going to happen at this rate either. I finally broke down last week in the lab, seeing the near vegetative body of the cancer patient and the still severed, gnawing head of the other. A scalpel was on the table next to me, and I decided it was enough. When I went home that night, I made up my mind. I knew my anatomy, but went into the bathroom to use the mirror just to make sure I was accurate. The scalpel stung as it first cut into my neck, making my hand recoil, but I had to follow through. I swiped it across quickly, slitting my jugular vein and pouring blood into the sink. I didn't realize how much blood I had in me until I saw it on the counter, almost overflowing the sink before the drain could take it all. I choked, unable to breathe as my throat was more concerned with the vein that was my slit. My breath caught, bleeding everywhere. The last thing I remember was falling back into unconsciousness. Though it wasn't complete blackout, I kept having waking nightmares on the floor in the sea of my own blood, unable to move as I laid face down, iron taste on my tongue. By the time I was able to get up, the cut had closed up, healed like a normal wound would. It was 3 days later from when I tried, and all I got was waking up in a pool of my own coagulated blood. I don't know if you flew too close to the sun, or maybe you're part of the experiment. At this point, I believe the strain that caused the loss of death may have gone airborne in the lab, bypassed the ejectable treatment method. I'm giving you this warning so you can do what I can't. It's only a matter of time until this is everywhere, considering we've been free to go in and out of the lab as we please. Find a way to die now before you lose your chance forever. I stood outside my bully's house with many get-well-soon balloons in hand after he mentioned his mother at-home life support during class today. I smiled as I released the Mylar balloons into the power lines that fed their home with electricity. Be careful who you're on a date with. By Aulrik. You are excited for your first date. You've been talking for some time together and have decided to hit up a local diner down the road. You arrived earlier than the date and are directed to the back corner of the restaurant. You sit patiently waiting while scrolling through your phone. You receive a text saying, "Sorry, I'm running a few minutes late." This is your prompt to be vigilant. If these conditions are met, follow the rules below for your own well-being. Condition 1. It always runs late at least by 10 minutes. Condition 2. It will order something else to drink and decline water. It hates water. Condition 3. It will use a fork over any other utensil. It likes to stab. Condition 4. It will order something small, claiming it's not very hungry at this time. It is starving. Its appetite is for something else. Condition 5. It forgets to blink. If you realize this, count to 100. If they have not blinked for 100 seconds, they are not your date. Rules for the first date when they are late. Rule 1. Do not go home with it. Rule 2. Do not be left alone with it. Ensure there are people around or you can see someone at all times. Rule 3. Drink your water. Do not allow your lips to become dry. Ask for refills as needed. Never have your cup of water to drop below the 1/4 mark. Rule 4. Do not use your phone while it's in your presence. Rule 5. If it drops any silverware, do not pick it up. Stand up away from the table. Do not lose sight of its face. Sit back down once it's sitting properly. Rule 6. Do not attempt to use the restroom or leave the restaurant until after the bill is paid. It will follow you. Rule 7. If you feel anything brushing or crawling up your leg, ignore it. Do not scream. Opening your mouth is an invitation inside. Rule 8. Drink water to decline any advances it may make in order to kiss you. Rule 9. Do not leave the table until it's completely out of sight. Rule 10. Check the back seat of your car before you enter. Rule 11. Drive and park in front of a hospital and wait for 10 minutes. Rule 12. When parking at home, do not linger outside or in your car. Rule 13. When inside your home, turn on every light in your home. Do not turn them off for the rest of the night. If a light flickers off, leave the room immediately and shut the door behind it. Rule 14. If all the lights in your home have turned off, do not investigate your breaker. Return to your car and drive to the hospital. Stay in the waiting room until daybreak. The elevator shuddered to a stop between floors, trapping me inside with a child patient who needed urgent care. Night fell, and I saw my nurse uniform rip under a full moon, summoning a beast inside me that would despise the sick baby in my arms. Halloween was my favorite holiday growing up. Now I absolutely hate it. By Horror Junkie 123. Warning, there is child abuse in this story. I won't sugarcoat it. I hate Halloween. The cool weather, the creepy decorations, the sound of children giggling as they bounce down the sidewalk. I can't stand it. I know that makes me sound like a Grinch, but hear me out. I have a good reason. As a child, Halloween was my favorite holiday. Yeah, Christmas was great and all, but there was just something different about the spooky season that really hit home with me. Well, until I turned 11, that is. That was the year that something truly horrendous happened. Something that turned my favorite holiday into the most dreaded day of the year.
Your costume looks great, kiddo. You're supposed to be a Power Ranger, right?
Uncle Ricky asked, taking a sip of his cider. I frowned. No, I'm Raphael. Uncle Ricky's brows furrowed. From Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He stared at me blankly. I could practically see the cogs trying and failing to turn in his head.
You know what? Whatever it is, it looks great. Fantastic job, buddy.
He ruffled my hair before draining the remaining of his cider. I took a step back, staring at the ground.
Guess what my...
Ding. The sound of the doorbell cut him off mid-sentence. That's probably Chris. See you later, Uncle Ricky. I raced to the door and flung it open to find Captain America standing before me. Chris's costume was detailed. From the suit to the cape to the shield, he had it all. His parents must have spent a pretty penny on it. Come on, Chris, let's go, I said, ushering him down the driveway. We made it about halfway down when Uncle Ricky appeared at the door.
You boys be safe now. Wouldn't want anything to happen to ya.
I shuddered. Something about the way he said that made me uneasy. We will be, I shouted back, still speed walking away.
Hey man, what gives? Why are we walking so fast?
Chris demanded once we reached the sidewalk. It's Uncle Ricky. I don't like being around him. He's weird.
Like, what kind of weird?
I shifted my gaze to the plastic pumpkin bucket swinging back and forth in my hand. I don't know. I just don't want to talk about it anymore, okay?
Fine, let's hit that house first. I heard they give out king-size candy bars.
Chris and I trick-or-treated well until past sundown. To my dismay, even though I wore a turtle shell backpack and a red bandana, most people automatically assumed that I was the Hulk. Eventually, I just stopped correcting them. By 9 o'clock, all the other kids had gone home, and I was getting tired of people thinking that I was Chris's sidekick. This is getting heavy. Are you ready to go back yet? I asked.
Come on, just one more house, then we'll... Hey boys, nice costumes you got there.
We froze. I didn't know why, but my heart began to thunder in my chest at the sound of the man's voice. We slowly turned to face him. What I saw still sends chills down my spine to this day. A tall figure stood before us. He wore a leather jacket and jeans, a red splintered hockey mask shrouding his face from view. Even through the thin plastic, I could hear his ragged breathing, the shallow rise and fall of his chest as he stood there. that predatory stare boring into me. That's not what frightened me the most. The man was holding a machete, one that was dripping with a dark crimson liquid. Chris and I didn't even say anything to each other. We didn't need to. We took off into a dead sprint, booking it down the sidewalk. Didn't have to look back to know the man was in hot pursuit. My legs pumped as fast as they would go, and I tried my hardest to focus on getting to safety. But I couldn't shake this nagging feeling in the back of my head. The feeling that if I didn't do something, that Halloween would be my last. Help us! I shrieked, praying that someone would come to our rescue. But no one did. The streets were empty, completely devoid of life. If anyone had heard my cries from inside their homes, they could have fooled me. Everyone probably thought it was just some dumb teenagers pulling a Halloween prank. Little did they know, Chris and I were running for our lives. After what felt like an eternity, curiosity got the better of me, and I had a chance to look back at our pursuer. My stomach instantly twisted into knots. He was gaining on us. Adrenaline took over, and I racked my brain for ideas. My candy bucket. I worked all night collecting my bounty, but in that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to make it home in one piece. I hurled the plastic pumpkin behind me with as much strength as I could muster. I watched as it ricocheted off the man's arm and landed on someone's lawn, spilling its contents into the grass. My heart sank. I was out of ideas.
This way!
Chris yelled, pointing down a side street. My face lit up. We were still out of earshot at that distance, but I could see a woman and a young child walking along the sidewalk further ahead of us. With how far we had strayed from our houses, she was the only chance we had at escaping from that lunatic. Just as I thought we were about to make it out of there alive, the unthinkable happened. I tripped. Time seemed to slow as I went sprawling to the unforgiving concrete. I landed hard, scraping both of my knees in the process. I wailed in agony as tears blurred my vision. I was so dazed from the fall that I had almost completely forgotten about the predicament I was in, until I heard the man's labored breathing hovering directly above me. I suddenly felt someone grab my arm and shove me onto my butt. I had never been more terrified than I was in that moment. The fear was so overwhelming that I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could barely even breathe. My assailant didn't waste his opportunity. He dropped to his knees and began crawling towards me on all fours like an animal, the machete dragging along the sidewalk, in sharp, crimson-coated blade clanking against the concrete as he advanced. My breath hitched in my throat as the man loomed over me, mere inches from my face. His dark, soulless eyes stared into mine. He leaned in so close that I could smell his breath. Then, to my horror, he brought the machete up to my neck. My mind raced as he lightly slid it across my throat. My entire body trembled when he placed his fingers to the fresh wound and dipped them into the blood spewing from within. I watched, feeling as if the world was crumbling around me, as the man reached underneath the hockey mask and plunged his fingers into his mouth.
You taste incredible,
he whispered, raising the machete again. My eyes grew wide as dinner plates, but this time for a different reason. In a blink of an eye, the man was laying on the ground with a rivulet of red spewing from his scalp. Chris tossed a brick to the ground beside him, pulling me to my feet. I had never been so happy to see him in my entire life.
Snap out of it, we have to go,
Chris shouted, tugging me down the street. I glanced at the man one more time before he took off. That scene is one that will be burned into my brain for as long as I live. Once we made it back to my house, I snapped. I cried uncontrollably for hours, and nothing could get me to calm down. Of course, the cops were called, but the man had vanished by the time they arrived at the scene. I was inconsolable for weeks afterwards, and not just because of what happened to me. When I glanced back that one final time, my attacker's mask had slipped, revealing part of his face. The image of my uncle laying there, still gripping the machete, is one that I will never forget. Uncle Ricky disappeared after that night. For reasons I can't explain, I never told my parents that he was the one chasing me. I don't know if they ever made the connection, but I didn't plan on bringing it up. My own memories of the event are painful enough, and I didn't want to relive that trauma. But now, I think I've changed my mind. Because yesterday, as I returned home from the pumpkin patch with my wife and daughter, I noticed something lying on a chair on a porch. My blood instantly ran cold when I saw it. A machete, a hockey mask, and a photo were neatly arranged on the cushion. My hands shook as I rummaged through them. When I picked up the photo and held it up to my face, all the awful events from the night came flooding back. The photograph depicted my daughter playing on our front yard, and on the back, written in crimson, was a note that said, "I really hope she tastes as credible as you did." The disease was 100% transmissible, but also 100% survivable. That's not what brought down our cowardly country. The disease simply compelled us to tell the truth, and the truth took care of the rest. We went trick-or-treating in a town that shouldn't exist. By philosophysubboy. Halloween had always been the best night of the year for Peter and me. We were best friends, inseparable since kindergarten. We were the kids who planned for weekends, mapped out every house in our neighborhood, plotted how to score the most candy. We talked about it at school, where the teachers always gave us their fake smiles and said, "Don't eat too much candy tonight." But Peter and I always had one goal: to get as much as we possibly could. We weren't satisfied with cheap treats. We wanted the good stuff, the full-size candy bars, the kind you had to beg your parents for at the store. And as we got older, we started to hear rumors. The kids at school said the next town over, Rosewood Heights, was rich. "They gave out the big stuff," one of the kids said, leaning in close like it was a secret. "Full-size Snickers, Reese's, even king-size sometimes." Peter and I had a look at each other then, knowing what we had to do. But there was a problem: our parents. They had warned us year after year, no one goes to Rosewood Heights. "It's dangerous," my mom had said. "Stick to our neighborhood." She never explained why, just shook her head and said, "It's not safe." We didn't believe her. Peter didn't, at least. "They don't want us to get better candy than the other kids," he scoffed. I agreed, of course. I mean, how dangerous could it be? It was just another neighborhood after all. The only thing different about it was that they had more money, that's all. So that year, we decided we'd go to Rosewood Heights. We hit every house, and then we come back with bags full of candy. It was foolproof. When Halloween finally came, we were buzzing with excitement. I remember the thrill of the night air, crisp and cool, the smell of fallen leaves and the faint smoke from people's chimneys. We raced through our neighborhood, Our pillowcases gained heavier with each stop. No matter how much candy we got, it wasn't enough. Peter kept saying, "It's nothing compared to what we'll get in Rosewood Heights." As the night wore on and the other kids started heading home, we stood at the edge of our town looking over at Rosewood Heights. From where we stood, we could see the neat rows of houses, each one bigger and fancier than the ones we were used to. The lawns were immaculate, not a single blade of grass out of place. There were even carved pumpkins on every doorstep, perfectly lit. "Let's go," Peter said, his eyes gleaming. "We'll be back before anyone notices." We crossed over, excitement bubbling up in our chests. As we walked down the first street, I couldn't believe how perfect everything looked. The houses were like something out of a magazine, perfectly painted, with manicured bushes and clean driveways. Every door we knocked on opened to a smiling face, and just like we had heard, they gave us full-size candy bars, Snickers, Reese's, Twix. Our pillowcases started to get heavy, but we kept going, house after house, collecting more and more. The people, though, they were a little strange. At first, I didn't think much of it. People smile on Halloween, right? But the smiles in Rosewood Heights were different. They were too wide, too forced. The eyes behind them were empty, like they were putting on a mask and not the fun kind you wear with a costume. It made me uneasy, but Peter just laughed it off. "They're just rich," he said, like that explained everything. I tried to ignore the weirdness. After all, we were getting the best candy haul of our lives. When we reached the last house on the block, something felt wrong. The house was different from the others. It was huge with dark windows, and the yard was covered in creepy clown decorations. You know the kind, grinning, elongated faces with sharp teeth and wild hair. I hated clowns, but Peter thought they were hilarious. "Come on, one last stop," he said, pulling me towards the door. I hesitated, looking through the window. That's when I saw them, the family. They were sitting at the kitchen table, all four of them, a father, a mother, a teenage girl, and a boy that looked about our age. But they weren't eating or talking or even moving. They were just sitting there, staring blankly ahead like mannequins. "Peter, I don't think..." "Don't be a chicken," Peter said before I could stop him. He rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house, loud and unnatural, like the chime had been distorted somehow. The family at the table didn't move at first, but then, one by one, they turned their heads. Their eyes locked on us through the window. I froze. There was something wrong with their faces. Pale, too pale, with dark circles under their eyes. They looked sick, but their expression didn't change. Before I could react, they shot out of their chairs. They didn't get up. They moved like they were being pulled by invisible strings, like puppets, all of them at once rushing for the door. "Run!" I screamed, but Peter didn't move. The door flew open. They grabbed him, pulling him inside with unnatural strength. Peter barely had time to scream before the door slammed shut. I could hear him shouting, but it was muffled, like the house itself was swallowing his voice. I didn't think. I dropped my pillowcase full of candy and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear footsteps behind me, fast, closing in. Every house on the block suddenly lit up one by one like a chain reaction. And then the doors started to open, and the people, the same people who had given us candy just minutes before, were stepping out. Only now they weren't smiling. Their faces were twisted like the clowns in the yard, with sharp grins and eyes that gleamed in the dark. They were coming for me. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, zigzagging between houses, through yards, jumping over fences. I could hear them getting closer, their footsteps heavy on the ground. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in pain, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I was almost caught once, a hand brushing against my arm as I sprinted down a driveway. But I slipped through their fingers, my fear driving me forward. Somehow I made it out of Rosewood Heights, my legs shaky, my breath ragged. The streetlights on my own neighborhood were a blur as I ran straight home. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. When I burst through the front door, my mom was waiting for me. Her face was pale with worry. "Where's Peter?" she asked, but I couldn't answer. I just ran to my room and crawled under the covers, shaking uncontrollably. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to forget what I had seen. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Peter being dragged into that house. I heard his screams echoing in my head. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. It was Peter's parents. They looked worried. His mom asked if I knew where he was. Said he hadn't come home last night. I wanted to tell them everything, but the words wouldn't come. I was too scared. Soon the police were called. They searched the neighborhood, questioned me and my family. I told them about Rosewood Heights, about the people, the house, the clowns. But nobody believed me. They thought I was making it all up, that I was just a scared kid telling ghost stories. The search for Peter went on for weeks, but eventually the case went cold. That was 28 years ago. Peter's face was on the news for a while, plastered on missing posters all over town. But as time passed, people stopped looking, stopped caring, and Rosewood Heights, I could never find it again. It was like it had disappeared, vanished without a trace. Every time I tried to go back, the streets were different, the houses were gone. It was like the town had never existed at all. Now I'm the only one who remembers. Halloween is coming again, and for the first time in 28 years, I know what I have to do. I'm going back to Rosewood Heights. I don't care if it's a ghost town or a nightmare I can't escape. I'm going back to find Peter. Wish me luck.
When I was a young man, during the war, I made a deal with the devil to save my town that caused an entire fleet of bombers to vanish into thin air. Laying on my deathbed nearly a century later, I understood where those planes went when the cluxing call of long dormant air raid sirens sounded once more. The Ritual of Halloween by Verastahl. Wake up. I felt myself coming up from some vast darkness, like a small balloon slowly rising to the surface of a vast black sea. I couldn't move or even blink, but my eyes were already open, so I could see that I was on our front porch, facing towards the front door and the steps leading out into the yard. Whatever was stopping me from moving, it didn't prevent me from feeling everything. My eyes were dry and burning. My throat felt raw and strange, like it was in the middle of choking on something, and I was sitting in a chair.
I couldn't move to see it, but I could feel the hardwood slats of a rocking chair under my legs and the flat planes of the armrest against my forearms and elbows. And that voice, was that Ellen?
Time to wake up now. The trick-or-treaters will be coming soon. And I want you to understand what's happening before they do. I had to slip a sedative into your food earlier. I couldn't risk you struggling or damaging something while I got you all fixed up. But only the paralytic should be left at this point.
It was Ellen. What was she talking about? Why was she doing this?
Now don't worry. Part of my preparation was to give you a breathing tube. At this dose of paralytics, I'm drip feeding you. I couldn't risk you suffocating to death now, could I? And rest assured, no one will notice the tube or the IV. That's one of the reasons I picked such an elaborate school costume for you. The mask and clothes will cover all of that. And I have a drape right behind your chair.
Mask? But she was right. I couldn't look around, but at the edge of my vision, I could make out the edges of what could be eye holes of a mask. And didn't my face feel like something was against it in spots?
I am speaking to you through wireless headphones I've taped into your ears to make sure you hear everything. I've recorded it ahead of time. All of this is so well planned. Well, I'm very proud of it. I'll have more little messages for you later on, but for now, we just have to wait for the first kid to come. I can't wait.
None of this made any sense. Ellen was a doctor, so I didn't doubt that she could do what she was describing. But why would she? In the 3 years we were married, we barely had an argument, much less anything violent. And now, what? She drugged me and tied me up to a chair dressed up like a monster? Fucking why? It couldn't be money. She made 5 times as much as I did. And I'd never seen any signs of problems between her and Angela. Just the opposite. She had taken to her new stepdaughter right away, and they'd gotten very close in the last couple of years. None of this made any sense. My mind was still spinning with different questions and scenarios when the first trick-or-treaters arrived, and before they could even ring the doorbell, Ellen was out on the porch in an elaborate witch costume I've never seen before. Hello, my pretties. Happy Halloween. I have oodles of candy for you. But first, who wants to beat up on this nasty ghoul on my porch? I keep telling him to go, but he wants all my candy, all of your candy. So who will go over and hit him for me? Maybe he'll finally go away. The 2 kids, a ghost and a soldier, both looked uncertainly between her and me. I could tell they couldn't see there was a person underneath, but she was still making a strange request. Maybe they would just... Are you sure it's okay? Is he going to, try to grab us or something? Which Ellen shook her head with a cackle. No, nothing like that. If I did my job right, he won't move a muscle. Nodding at her and then glancing at each other, the 2 boys crept over closer to my end of the porch. The ghost wrinkled his nose and then glanced back at Ellen. I hear a weird noise. It was probably the fucking breathing machine. Everything I heard was muffled. But maybe the kid was bright enough to know what it was or to tell something was wrong. Ellen grinned. That's just the ghoul growling because he knows you're fixing to make him leave. He can't hurt you, but he's grumpy about someone showing him who's boss. The ghost nodded uncertainly, turning back around just as the tiny soldier punched me in the stomach. It didn't hurt, not really, but it was uncomfortable, and it focused my clouded mind on the fact that I could still feel quite a bit. I had to get out of this fast before she did something worse to me. Straining with all my will, I tried to move at all or make a sound, but nothing seemed to change. And then the ghost kid kicked me in the shin. This did hurt, sending a thrill of anger and fear through me at the surprise and the sensation. The ghost and soldier had already scooted back across the porch and were collecting their candy, but I was still reeling from the pain and the inability to fully react to it. Strange as it seems, not being able to yell or grab my leg was worse than the pain itself. It seemed to stretch everything out longer, make it sharper. I was so caught up in it that I didn't even notice when the next kids came up. She got them to stomp on my feet. This went on for another 30 minutes or so before the earbuds in my ears flared to life again.
The sacrifice of safety has been completed, and your process of annulment has begun.
There were 3 black candles on the baker's rack next to the front door, and as Ellie's words curled in my ears, she lit the leftmost one. There was nothing else said at the time, which was good because I don't know how much I would have been able to focus on. My legs, feet, and hands were all aching from hits, kicks, and pinches. Some kids refused to come near me, or they got close and then back away without even hurting me. But only some. There were still plenty that didn't mind letting out some aggression on the bad old ghoul in the rocking chair. I kept hoping that someone knows that I was real, that there was a person under the costume. They noticed my eyes or how my skin felt when they twisted or something. But even if they did, they may think it was just a weird costume and I was in on it for Halloween, even with trick or treat being done 3 days early. Still, that might be my best hope. That or Angela coming home and finding me like this, so long as she didn't get hurt. Either way, I just have to put up with the kids punching and kicking me for a while longer. Ellen gave me a wink, almost like she could read my thoughts, and then she ducked inside. When she came back out, she was carrying a small table with a tray on it. On the tray was a neat row of sticks. She set it all down between the front door and my spot before turning to the next batch of 3 children, explaining to them that she brought out some special-made ash wands that would help them get rid of her mean old ghoul, and that these wands weren't made for waving. They were made for poking. The harder, the better, and the one that poked the hardest would get the best candy. It seemed like this lasted longer than the punches and kicks, and it was way more painful. My eyes would water some, but she was quick to moisture my eyes with drops and wipe them and my tears away before the next group came up. Some of these later trick-or-treaters were older and bigger, and there were at least a couple times that it felt like they'd broken through my skin and punctured something, but I couldn't be sure. The end of the wands were blunt and rounded, and my costume felt thick. Knowing Ellen, it was probably dark too, which would make a bit of blood easier to miss. There were times where the pain was bad enough that I would swim out of consciousness a little. It was tempting to just sink back into the black ocean, but that would be a death sentence. I had to keep trying to fight off the drugs she was giving me, keep looking for an opening or a mistake. The porch seemed dark where I was, But if I could get one of the kids to see my eyes, maybe they know I was real in there and something was wrong.
The sacrifice of mercy is complete, and your annulment draws to a close.
She lit the rightmost black candle. Fuck, this was all clearly building towards something, but what? Was she really going to kill me? I was suddenly pulled out of my thoughts by the screen door squeaking as Ellen came back out with a butcher's knife from the kitchen.
Who wants to stab the ghoul? Now, as you see, I clearly marked red circles on the ghoul. Only stab him in these spots, okay? And only once. If you stab him anywhere else, he won't go away and you won't get any candy.
The football player standing in front of me looked at her doubtfully as he gripped the knife. Fuck me, he was big. He'd probably just come from goddamn practice to get some candy. So, I just stab him? Like it won't hurt the, doll or whatever? Ellen waved away his concerns with a waggle of black nails.
He's replaceable, but also why you only hit a red area limits the damage.
Giving him a sly smile, she patted him on the chest.
Unless you're too scared of him.
He stabbed me somewhere in the shoulder, not as hard as I expected and somehow not as painful as the wands, but still worse in a way. I could feel some core part of my body screaming at me to protect it, that my life was spilling out now and I had to stem the flow. My vision blurred a little, but tears never really came. Instead, I just stared out as the football player gave the knife back to Ellen and went away without trying to get any candy. There were 4 more after that, 1 in my left foot, 2 in my right forearm, and the last one on my outer hip. There were other kids that just refused from the start, or once they got closer and saw what I imagined was blood pooling under my chair, also backed off. And there were 2 groups that backed off after the first one did a stab. Maybe because the fake ghoul blood packs Ellen claimed to be hidden in the red stab zone seemed a bit too real. But still, I could feel myself weakening, which meant that time was running out. It was also time for Angela to be getting home. The plan, best I could remember, was that she was going trick-or-treating with some friends from school this year, but hours had passed and there hadn't been any new kids coming by for at least 20 minutes. What if she came home and Ellen hurt her? Or what if she was already tied up somewhere or dead? I had been torn between wanting to see her and wanting her to stay away for hours. But as it grew later, I could feel myself drowning in dread. As though the thought of her made her appear, Angela suddenly came walking up onto the porch to give Ellen a gentle hug. The sight of her touching my daughter was horrifying, and I tried again to move or make a sound, but it was no use. And maybe it was for the best. If Angela didn't notice me, maybe Ellen wouldn't hurt her. Maybe she'd just kill me and go away. Just need to accept it and hope that Angela was looking right at me. Oh no. No, don't be so obvious. Ellen's looking at you. Baby, don't walk this way. Just pretend like you don't know. Go up to your room, lock the door. She's reaching for something. The knife? No, the letter again. As Angela stops in front of me, Ellen lit the center candle.
The time for the sacrifice of love has come.
Picking up the lit candle, she moved past Angela to lean over me, touching the yellow flame to my costume in several places before stepping back. I could smell cloth and plastic burning, and the heat was already reaching out to me through the layers of costume. Terrified of the pain that was coming, I just focused on Angela, my sweet angel, dressed in her little devil costume, still holding the same pumpkin bucket I had gotten her 3 years ago. Please, God, let her escape this. Let her not remember it. She looks so sad staring at me. Please let this not be how she remembers.
I love you, Daddy.
Angela brought the pumpkin bucket up, slinging gasoline and dripping candy onto my chest. I saw Elaine pull her back as light flared, and then there was only heat, and pain, and silence. Humans are biologically hardwired to find babies and infants cute, instinctively encouraging us to protect and care for them. So why do I, with my newborn child in my arms, feel such an uncanny sense of dread looking at it? The Passenger by Erutious. I don't drive, so a big part of my daily back and forth is calling and using Uber. This sounds pretty mundane, but today's trip was anything but normal. I had been out late and decided to Uber myself home instead of trying to get a cab. I have nothing against cabs, but you never know who you're going to find when you're out riding in a big yellow. I like Uber because I feel like they vet their guys a little better. That's probably incorrect, but I've yet to have a bad Uber experience until tonight. My friends tell me all the time how they've had terrible experiences with the service, but I get to have a creep. And I was feeling pretty good when I put in the address at around 11:30 to be picked up. The app took in my information, chewed it out, and I received a message that said M was coming to pick me up. I looked at it for a minute, not sure if I had seen it right. There was almost always a full name when you got Uber. Usually it's with a picture attached. This was just a letter with no picture. I started to cancel a ride, but then I felt a little silly for getting rattled. It was just a different kind of profile. The guy would show up and be as normal as anyone else, and I'd make it home in time to get a shower and head to bed before midnight. I gave it about 10 minutes, and just as my finger was starting to hover over the cancel button, a large black Lincoln Town car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't what I was expecting, but when I looked at the vehicle description, I saw that it was blank too. So I suppose I was in for a surprise. Who knew? Maybe it was just someone pulling a Halloween prank, and I'd have something funny to talk about on the internet with strangers. It was October, and I was getting used to seeing spooky encounters on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. As the car came to a stop, the door popped open on its own. I expected a creepy voice to tell me my ride was here, but the inside was as silent as the grave. Now, I was pretty sure that this was some sort of Halloween prank. It was a couple of days before, and it sounded like someone had decided to get a little festive. This would definitely be something I could tell my friends about the next day, so I just shrugged and climbed in. The door closed as I got in, and we headed towards my apartment. "So," I asked, "have the fares been pretty good tonight?" I expected the creepy voice to come out then, but there was nothing. The man behind the wheel just drove, taking turns as they came. The cab of the truck was dark, but I could see his eyes reflected in the rearview mirror. I didn't linger on them. They were bloodshot and not altogether healthy looking. They stared unearnestly at me in the rearview mirror, and I wondered how he could drive so well with not looking at the road at all. I looked behind the seat because sometimes you get little information cards down there, but there was nothing but a little pocket that sits behind most seats. I didn't feel like I was in danger or anything. This was still just someone's idea of a joke, and I suppose I would get a little spooked, and then he would laugh and tell me it'd all been a prank. That's how it seemed to work with these things. Everyone had their phone out and was pulling little pranks on each other. and I suppose by the end of the night I'd be on someone's YouTube channel. If he didn't want to talk, I suppose I would just have to sit quietly and say nothing. The longer we drove, the harder it became to maintain. I kept looking back at the rearview mirror, looking at his eyes as they stared at me with such intensity. It was impossible not to notice. They never budged, and the man didn't seem to blink. I tried to look out the window, tried to look at anything besides that little mirror, but the longer the ride went, the more difficult it became to look away. His eyes weren't particularly nice, but they were almost mesmerizing in their otherworldliness. I could see every vein that stood out on the whiteness of that orb. I could see the little wrinkles at the corner of his eye. I could see the bags that they sat upon, and I could even see a large mark just in the corner of the left bag. I tried to make myself look away, but my eyes kept coming back to his like a bird trapped by a snake. The longer I looked into his eyes, the more sure I was that he was not going to take me to my destination. I couldn't have said why. I had no reason to think he was going to try to kidnap me or something. But as the turns went on and on, a ride that should have taken 10 minutes seemed to have taken an hour and then 2. I found myself focusing on the bloodshot eyes more and more as the silence stretched on, and I could feel my teeth trying to clack together. Why was he staring at me? Did he want something from me? Was he going to hurt me? The longer I thought about it, the less I found I wanted to know. I thought about grabbing for the door handle and making my escape, but my hands were frozen in my lap as I sat over my purse. I wanted to ask him why he was staring and what he expected of me, but my lips were frozen together as a sense of horror grated on me. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, and I felt certain that by the next day I'd be nothing but a scribble in the paper. They would find me in an alley or something, my eyes wide with fear as my heart had simply stopped, and then no one would know what happened to me. I tried to shake my head and tell myself I was being ridiculous, but the longer I looked into his eyes, the more sure I was of his intentions. I was going to die. I was going to die. I was going to die. The words kept rattling in my skull like a trapped bird, and when I turned my eyes to look at the window, I suddenly discovered we weren't in the city anymore. We were heading up an unfamiliar streets, and the driver was taking turns seemingly at random. I wasn't even sure if he knew where he was going anymore, and each turn made me want to begin screaming all over again. I wanted to pound on the door and tell him he had to stop. I wanted to be out of here. I wanted to be anywhere but here. And I suddenly knew I would never take a ride from anyone I didn't know ever again. My parents always told me not to take rides from strangers. This was just more of that, wasn't it? I was in the car with someone I didn't know, and their eyes were boring into me like they knew all my secrets and all my sins. It went on and on like that, some undetermined amount of time going by as I sat and prayed that I one day would be able to return home and know peace again. Suddenly he was going faster. He increased to 40, then 50, then 60, then 70, and then he was taking those turns of speed like something out of a carnival ride. He was going so fast that there was no way he could have known whether he could make the turn or not. Every time he took a turn, I thought we were going to crash into something, and every turn we kept going just as we had before. I found myself clutching at my hands as I lay on my purse, and I was praying in my mind for all of this to stop. I had enough. I wanted to be off whatever this was, and I closed my eyes as I felt a soft, muffled word come stabbing out of me. Stop. Please, stop. He slammed his foot on the brakes, and I shut my eyes. I expected to feel the impact. We were going to crash now, and I'd be all over the inside of his vehicle instead of an alley. We smash into something and die, and then I opened my eyes, and we were suddenly in front of my apartment. The door was open, and it appeared I was free to go. I looked at the dark miasma where the driver sat, and before I could stop myself, I thanked him. I feel foolish for it now, but I was thankful. I had thought for sure I was going to die, and that no one would ever be the wiser. But instead, I had been allowed to live, and that was something worth celebrating. I got out of the town car, making sure I got my purse, and as it rolled away, I felt a sudden overwhelming sense of happiness. It appears that I was right, because as I'm sitting here, I am sharing this with strangers. I was hesitant to tell people. Some of you might actually seek out this stranger and his otherworldly Uber. But if you do, at least you'll know the experience is worth the price tag. I've yet to be charged for whatever strange cab service that was. I'm not sure if I'll ever sign up for something like that again. After what I experienced tonight, I think I may be a little less picky about taking a cab. All the evidence of cheating was on her table, and she had already killed her boyfriend. After destroying the evidence and getting rid of the child inside her, there'll be no way for her husband to find out about her cheating. And now the stories have come to an end. If you're still awake, well, I hope you fall asleep shortly. And the sounds that you hear in the background are going to take center stage for no more than 30 minutes to help you fall asleep or stay asleep. But if you are awake and want to hear more stories, I do have playlists for that as well. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.